This boot that I hold in my hand is the Scarpa F1. It's a boot that we have skied very much, both myself, Danny, and Matt. We love it. It's been around for a long time. I think basically this version of the F1 has almost been unchanged for at least 5 years, I think. And I'm very happy with it. The other day, I dropped my daughter off at gymnastics and I had some time to kill, so I swung by Skimo Co. in Salt Lake, which is a very dangerous activity because the only possible outcome is that I spend lots of money and have to make excuses to my wife later. And I started talking to them about the F1 and how I loved it, but I've always wanted just a little bit more out of it, meaning either, you know, I wanted the F1 but lighter, and they came through. Scarpa came out with the F1 LT, which is essentially an F1 but lighter. It doesn't ski as strong as the F1, but it is very, a very good boot for its weight, a great boot for its weight. And now I was saying, you know, it would be great if I could get the F1, but maybe just a little bit beefier. And I'm willing to even give away a couple of grams, just to get a little bit beefier, stronger, stiffer type boot. And so we hemmed and hawed and looked at about 100 boots on their wall. And one that they brought my attention to is the Movement Free Tour. And of course my interest was piqued. They said the feedback was that it did ski a little bit stronger than the F1. It's a boot that kind of stays off the radar. You may recognize this boot because Roxa, Movement, and Hagan all use the same shell mold. I don't know if it's the same factory in Europe that produces them, but it's the same shell mold, so they will look identical, but there are very subtle differences in each manufacturer in the materials that they use, especially the liners that they put in, and that drastically changes the weight, the stiffness, the performance of the boot, both walking and skiing. So this boot, I tried right out of the box with its stock liner. We molded it up, took it out skiing, and right off the bat, I could tell it definitely was a stiffer boot than the F1. I could feel the shell a lot more through the liner than my F1. The F1 just is like a slipper, it really envelops. It has that Intuition liner that molds really good, and you don't get those pressure points, those stiff kind of carbony shell feel pressure points. So this was a stiffer boot. Stock compared, with my footbeds, they were within like 1 gram of each other. So about 1,305 grams each. So boot in a stock form with my footbed, 1,305 grams each. And so one thing I did notice is that yes, it was a little bit stiffer, and it also, the walk mode was freer, meaning that there was less resistance in the walk mode. And that was a definite plus, because the F1 definitely has a great walk mode, but this was noticeably less resistance, I would say. That it walked better. I don't know if the range of motion is any better or worse, but it definitely moves more freely. And the walk and ski mechanism is as simple as it can be. There it's locked, there it's unlocked. You can do it through your pant cuff, you can do it very quickly. And so I love the simplicity of this boot because you have essentially one buckle on the forefoot, which I should note is not as good as the Scarpa Boa. And when I say not as good, I mean it doesn't envelop that forefoot as well as the Boa. You definitely have to use that micro adjust on here to find that sweet spot, because one turn too many and you got a pressure point. One turn too less and your foot is swimming. Danny actually picked up a previous version of this boot. He found a bunch of trouble keeping his foot locked down with this system versus the F1 and the Boa that just cinches right around and keeps everything contained. I have a very high instep, a very high volume foot, so my problem is always not having too much pressure up here and not having my boot feel like it is just being squished. And this did a pretty good job. I still definitely felt more direct pressure on that forefoot than the Boa, but it was well within my comfort level. So very simple boot, again, walk ski mechanism, and one power buckle, I guess they call it, kind of the power strap one buckle, and that's it, and then you're in walk mode. So unlock, and You walk, you know, time to ski, click, snap, you're on your way. After skiing this, a really, really big day, so I felt like I had a pretty good idea what this boot was. I just started thinking, you know what would be awesome is if it was this shell, or I could get kind of the performance of this shell, but the comfort and just better fit of my F1. So what I ended up doing was picking up a Scarpa Intuition ProFlex Evo liner, otherwise known as the stock liner for the F1. This is one of my favorite liners because it is an Intuition liner, and anybody who knows anything about Intuition liners know that they mold so good. I mean, nothing creates that custom heat mold like an Intuition liner, but a lot of their touring liners, even their Pro Tour, just are a little bit too bulky and too stiff for some of the lighter touring boots. This is like a light version of their Pro Tour. Still an Intuition liner, you get a good mold. It's not a wafer thin liners like you get in some of the Skimo boots, but it is not overly thick and can fit in a lot of light touring boots. So, had this liner molded to this shell, and it is now one of my favorite boots to ski. I paired it with a Movement Alp Trax 106 ski, and it seemed like that's exactly what it was meant for. This is meant to ski like a fat or a wider but lighter backcountry ski. So I like to think of this as kind of, if you're looking for a ultralight free ride setup, this might be a boot that you look towards, because it does have power, it does have stiffness, it can drive heavier skis, but it is not a beef boot. This is not a Scarpa Maestrale, this is not a Technica 0G, this is not those kind of Hoji type free ride boots. This is I'd say an ultralight but free ride boot. It's still powerful, stiff, walks incredibly well, and it may just earn a permanent position in the boot quiver. It's going to be hard. I can't quite yet put the F1 out to pasture because, one, it has been so good to me. It is just such the perfect blend of, you know, comfort, touring, and performance that the verdict's still out. I like this boot a lot. I've loved this boot for a long time. We'll see what happens. I will say that Scarpa, you can tell, is an Italian footwear manufacturer, because just the shape of the shell and the feel of your foot inside, you notice that there is a lot more finesse and I'd say just craftsmanship in Scarpa's boots. But the Movement Free Tour, a surprising arrival on my radar, and I think I'm going to enjoy it a few more times.